I'm Joe Halco, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being for the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously and strive to provide a continuum of the highest quality services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. In this episode, we'll be discussing NCSS home and community-based services that are designed to support children, youth, and families across environments based on their clinical needs. The program is a strengths-based, goal-oriented program that supports children and families with the skills necessary to provide stability within their home community. Services are intended to support children with acute clinical mental health needs and to support the family systems where safety is a concern. The program works collaboratively with the client, family, and treatment team to develop and implement an organized plan of care to support the needs of the client as identified through the assessment process. Services include direct support in-home and community with individual clients and caregivers, service coordination, and treatment planning. To gain a greater understanding about NCSS home and community-based services and the impact that they have on children, youth, and families, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests. Holly Branon, Team Leader of the Home and Community-Based Supports, and Joshua Tuck, Home and Community Support Specialist. I'd like to welcome both of you to the program.
Hi, Joe.
So let us begin with now I know I said a lot in that intro, but as with anything, you need to hear things so many times before it sort of, you get a sense for it. But, what does home and community support-based services mean, and who do we serve?
Yeah, so the Home and Community Support Team is a team in the Children's Division at NCSS, and we provide social, emotional, and behavioral support to children 6 to 22, either in the community setting or the home setting, depending on the need of the family and the client. And we really just have this philosophy of meeting clients where they're at. So if the needs are within the home, we focus on the home with the family system as a whole. And if the support is needed in the community, then we work one-on-one with the children in the community doing skills-based work. And really, as you mentioned in your intro, it's really based on the assessment process and what's identified as treatment plan goals in their individual plan of care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really community-based. We've done lots of services in lots of different places, including, clinical settings at our office or within grocery stores, parks, outings, really any community-based setting where kids might need skills.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that it's a really broad kind of program. So we serve a lot of different clients with a lot of different needs. So, some kids have some lower level needs, and then we serve and provide support to kids who have some pretty clinically acute needs. So we really focus on the assessment process and the plan of care to really determine what that service looks like. So for some, it may be offering a group at the community or at the agency within the community, working on, social skills with other clients that have the same identified needs. For some, it's working with the family system around communication and supporting the family system as a whole. And then sometimes it's working with kids, in the community for multiple hours a week, just really depending on their diagnosis and need.
And one of the things I do want to bring up is, so many times I run into people and talk about NCSS, and they have the impression that most of what we do is within our buildings, and as we know, that's certainly not anywhere near the way that it is, because only about 8% of our services really are provided inside our buildings. So I think it's important that people do understand just that NCSS is truly everywhere throughout our community helping people. And your program is certainly one that is, right at the top of the list when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think there's this stigma that mental health services happen within an office setting, one-on-one. But what I really appreciate about our program is we do take the kids out into the community or work with them in their home where they're most comfortable. And we find that working from a high preference framework, so doing activities that, bring interest to the kids and something that they enjoy doing, they're more willing to engage with us, and we see better progress being made. We are really fortunate that we have such a great community to kind of take them to different community outings. We have a wonderful rec department in St. Albans, and we are often utilizing the pool, utilizing Branon's pools, going down to spare time bowling. So a lot of times it really looks like mentoring or something fun, but there is therapeutic work happening too. And it's more enjoyable for the staff and for the client when everyone's willing to engage and having fun while doing it.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what are the key components of the home and community-based services?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's high preference. So we really want to meet kids where they're at. We really want to have them engage in activities that are fun for them while sneaking in some therapeutic work as well, based on what's identified in their treatment plan. It's also client-centered. So we use an assessment process upon intake, which is the Children and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Assessment. And that's really looking at what are the strengths that the client and the family already have, and utilizing that in our framework of creating a treatment plan for them while working towards the needs that they have. So a lot of the needs may be around like anger management or anxiety or, maybe social skills or self-regulation strategies. So we really work from a client-centered lens of what is going to work for them and help them meet their goals the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even looking at our CANS assessment, children, adolescent needs and strengths is what we're looking at is what are the needs and what are the strengths, and we try to build up the strengths and even identify what they are and help children and families work off from some of those strengths they have to meet their goals.
Yeah, and a big part of it is one-on-one or doing that direct client care, family care, through family meetings or working in the community. But there's also a huge component that's service coordination and treatment planning. So we work collaboratively with different treatment team members based on, who's involved in that client's treatment. So it could be the schools. We have really great relationships with the schools, and we're often attending treatment team meetings to kind of help, navigate those situations for the family. We also work closely with the primary care physicians, NMC, DCF, NFI, depending on what other services the client may have. And I think that's something that's really great about our program and about our agency as we work collaboratively with the system of care. And I think that just demonstrates how collaborative everyone is, and we all have the same goal of supporting the clients in our community.
Yeah, that is something else that I do believe a lot of people don't realize is the fact that it's not as if NCSS is on an island. There's this collaboration with other community partners to wrap services, all with the goal of helping the individual. And of course, as you've mentioned, every plan is individual. There's no cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
To services.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even just linking families to resources. We may not be working directly with the client yet. Maybe it's directing them to CVOEO so that they can, access some of the services that they provide our community so that, the basic needs are met. And once basic needs are met, then it allows us to get in there to really focus on the therapeutic work that needs to be done.
Yeah. So, I know you've kind of touched on it, but let's talk about goals and realizing that all are not the same, but in general, so the goals of the Home and Community-Based Services Program.
Yeah, I would say, the overarching goal is to support clients to be in their community and make positive impacts in their community. And we want to decrease disruptions in, placements and making sure that children remain where we know they're going to be most successful, and, with their social supports and family supports. So I would say that's, the overall goal is to keep kids successful in their own community.
Yeah.
And let's talk about access, because that's critically important. How do children and families access the home and community-based services?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have a really collaborative relationship with a lot of different community partners.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, that is the link between, maybe school and NCSS. Maybe it's someone at the school making a referral to NCSS. And they go through an intake process where they do a biopsychosocial. So it's really going over their history and what kind of brings them to NCSS to get services. And then they do the CANS assessment, and then it's determined, is our program a good fit for the kiddo, or should we be looking at another service that NCSS offers? But we really focus on working with the schools and primary care physicians to make sure that the needs of the kids in our community are met. So a lot of times, when we think about the goals of community support, it's around, just supporting social and emotional health of the children and how we can best support them to be, overall healthy.
Now, you've talked about, excuse me, that we do collaborate with a lot of other community partners. You've mentioned some of them. Let's talk about the importance of that collaboration. Excuse me. I have a frog in my throat today.
Okay.
But let's talk about, why that is so critically important as opposed to us trying to, do everything on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes to like continuity of care. If we were to say serve a client or family individually, our impact is less than if we can get the whole team on the same page. And so that's why we try to work really closely with community partners, treatment teams, whether it's with a client or family's school, there's CCF involvement. And sometimes they just need a higher level of care. So we really access our community partners to try to work together as a team. There's times where, we might be mental health professionals, but we still don't know all the rules when it comes to like school things. So we'll reach out to like Vermont Family Network and help get the family advocates when they're navigating tricky school situations. So it's really just about connecting to meet the family's needs and get them the best quality care we can.
Yeah, and a lot of times we see, when thinking about mental health and different diagnoses, one thing that we look at is how long has it been happening for? Where is it happening? What is the impact of what's going on for this kid? And a lot of times it's across environments. So it's really important that we pull in community partners to kind of talk about, we can make an impact maybe for that individual, but how do we make an impact across environments? So it's really important to pull in the school team so that we're, on the same page of doing what's best for this client. Similar to, providing support to the family rather than the individual client. I think one thing that we're really passionate about is working with the family system, because we know for, long-term change to be made, it's not just the focus on the client. So we really have to work with all people involved in the client's life, especially thinking about kids. They need the support of everyone that's part of their team, and that includes parents, providers, teachers. So I think collaboration is key. And another kind of part of the work that we do is around trauma-informed parenting, so that the problem may be identified for the client, but really, what has happened in that child's life and what was going on for them that's impacting them. And, is that some of the reason that we're seeing maybe some of these behaviors or some of the concerns that may bring them to treatment. So it's really looking at it from, many different angles of how we can best support this kid. And then thinking about another component of care, which is a really hard one, because I think once we get into, services for a kid, it's hard to discharge and think about those kids and families being successful without our support. But, our goal is always to link them and to transition them to more community-based supports that could be beneficial for them. So we enjoy the work we do. We enjoy working with the clients and families, and it's always a win for us when we can, transition to them to more of a community-based support and a lower level of care.
Yeah, and I think that's important, is that, once somebody is in a program or what, it doesn't mean necessarily they're going to be in it forever. Actually, you're right, Holly, it's gratifying when you can have somebody to grow and they get beyond the fact that they need all the supports in their life.
Yeah, and I think that's why we see so much success in our program because, as we know, resiliency is kind of a hot topic that we talk about. And the number one protective factor and the number one resiliency factor that really supports kids in our community and just kids overall is being connected to at least one trusted adult. And a lot of times that is someone within the home and community-based team. So thinking about that transition away from that is really hard. So that's why we also work collaboratively with the family in school of, trying to brainstorm who can maybe we transition this support to so that the kid can continue to be successful.
Mm-hmm. So we talk about access and collaboration. Let's talk about barriers to services and how they can be overcome.
Do you want to take this one or you want me to? I think in, thinking of Franklin and Grand Isle County, our catchment area, I think one of the biggest barriers for the families that we work with is transportation. And that's why I'm really proud to be part of this program because we are going into the homes in the communities of where these kids live. So that cuts down one of the biggest barriers that we see. And that may mean a staff is driving a lot of miles a day, but we know that in order for the kids to get the services that they need, it's important for us to go to them. We also see success when kids are comfortable in the environment that they're getting services. I think another issue that Vermont faces and I think the country as a whole faces is just staffing shortages. So unfortunately, we do have long wait list, high caseloads, which is hard because we want to help everyone, and that makes it really difficult when we can't. So, as the team leader, I'm always trying to pull staff in and get creative of how we can kind of reach the need of more kids and to provide more services to make our community better off as a whole. So one thing that we have implemented is groups, community support groups. So maybe it's not a one-on-one individualized service, but maybe it's supporting kids in a group setting where they have peers that are working on the same goals. In that way, we can provide a service to more than just one individual child. Do you have any barriers?
Yeah, I think transportation is the biggest one and accessing specific services, which is why we do actually go to people's homes and meet them there. I mean, Franklin and Grand Isle counties can be really large.
Yeah.
And there are some really rural areas, and we can access that. There's not a whole lot of public transportation, so it's hard for families and clients, and it's a lot of time to go from Richford to St. Albans for a 1 hour meeting. That's 3 hours of their day.
Sure is,
So,
yeah.
we provide that transportation and try to alleviate some of that for them.
Yeah, and I mentioned, basic needs earlier around connecting people to CVOEO, and I think that's also another barrier is the lack of resources that is pretty prevalent for our families right now, and just trying to prioritize something when maybe they don't have housing or something like that. So we really tried to work with them to get in there and help them maybe secure housing. But these families have a lot on their plate, so helping them to understand that we're there to help, I think, is a barrier sometimes as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about when I say our NCSS's role within the system of care.
Yeah, so as the designated agency, we are responsible for providing the mental health services to the children in our community. So, our role is really to collaborate, as we mentioned earlier, with the many different people on the treatment team. So with schools, with DCF and other community partners. So we really support the mental health needs of the individuals, and maybe that's providing a one-on-one service, or maybe it's supporting larger meetings to talk about a client in crisis or stabilization. And unfortunately, some kids we do see having to go out of the community for placement and for treatment, and we're very involved in that as well. As I mentioned, our goal is always to keep kids in our community and to remain in our community, and I think we are always a support of that. We're always part of that. We collaborate a lot with the Department of Mental Health to kind of make some of those decisions and to talk about what's best for these families and these clients that we work with.
Yeah, when you talk about the real crisis situations, the role that we do play with other community partners, and I would guess, once again, it's individualized because no two cases are the same. But when we truly get into crisis situations with young people, what our role is in supporting those individuals and their families.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have seen an increase of, maybe kids accessing the emergency department, and that has many different implications, right? And it can have a ripple effect of, everyone in our community. So our goal is really to collaborate with our crisis team to make sure and ensure that doesn't happen. I think one of the great parts of our program is it can be really flexible. So if we're seeing, a client that may be accessing crisis more or may be accessing the emergency department, we can kind of step in and support some collaboration, and maybe it's making outside referrals or even internal referrals to increase services, or maybe it's bringing everyone to the table for what we call a coordinated service plan to talk about what is going on for this family, where are the needs and the challenges, and how as a system can we kind of support them and collaborate together to make sure that we're doing what's best for them and can support them in the best way possible.
Now, as you look at the program and you look at everything the way that it's structured today, what are your hopes and goals for the services moving forward?
Take that one off.
Yeah, I think some of the hopes and goals that we would love to see our team grow. We would love to be able to serve more of the community. I think in the last few years, our team has kind of shrank a little bit, and we used to have a couple of individualized teams within our team, and that has kind of gone away. I think in the future, we would like to get back to a similar model where we can serve some of our more intense kids in a smaller team. We had wraparound services, we had a specific family support team, and all of that has kind of been blended into this home and community-based team. So I think our hope is to grow the team, to be able to serve the community in a better way, even a more efficient way. Currently we have wait lists. We would love to see 0 in our wait lists. I think our families and clients would like that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it starts with staffing a little bit. So how do we get people interested in the work that we do? How do we get them in the field? And just understand what a rewarding job it is. It's also, a hard job. So I think I really kind of focus in on the burnout and how do we kind of overcome that. But my overall goal is similar to Josh's, in being able to serve every client that we need to with the level of support that they need. We talked about the emergency department and crisis situations. I think we're seeing an increase in that. So my goal would be to really be able to have the staffing to be able to go out to families' homes when they are struggling in a crisis situation. I think that's one of the barriers that families face is that they kind of feel alone in it right now just because of staffing shortages. So I would love to be able to do that and to support kids to remain in the community. And maybe that is offering, a lot of services up front to kind of get them to stabilize. But to me, that feels better than having them go out of the community for stabilization. I also think, part of that is also natural transitions out of services. So, what's in our community, how can we grow our community, and even like mentorship programs or something like that, so that as I was talking about, that resiliency factor of being connected to an adult can happen for some of these kids who may feel disconnected from their community or not have as big of a social circle as others do, and how can we think about services a little bit differently. So maybe it doesn't feel like they're losing something, but it's a success in transitioning to something a little more appropriate for the level of care that they need.
So in a perfect world, to address these staffing shortages, so for someone who's viewing this episode, what type of education would somebody need to be able to fit right into to your team? Just so that people have kind of an understanding.
Yeah, so it's a bachelor's level program. So anyone out of college can apply for it. I think I came, with not a lot of experience, and then 10 years later, I'm still in the field and love it. We always have job shadow opportunities, so if people want to come and shadow and see what it's about, I think it's a really rewarding career and a really interesting program to be a part of. And if someone is interested in this, kind of field, you get exposed to so much because you're a part of many different systems. You collaborate with a lot of different people within the community that kind of just helps you grow professionally. So, yeah.
And again, I know that you would be elated if you could grow your team and be able to, because the biggest thing is you don't want to have wait lists, and people that do need assistance, you want to be able to provide it in as timely a manner as possible.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we know is that when people come through the door for services, they need it in that moment. And we don't necessarily have the capacity to do that. We are always triaging, so if there is a significant crisis, we do try to meet the needs of that. But yeah, I think more rapid access would be wonderful, and that would be one of my biggest hopes and goals, because sometimes it's a couple weeks, couple months down the road before we can get to them, and luckily they've been able to work it out on their own, but sometimes they're also sitting there in that those hard times without the support that they need. So
yeah, which is difficult for them, and I mean,
Yeah,
we're always
absolutely.
trying to put ourselves in their position.
Yeah.
And they really are seeking assistance. And it's so hard for some individuals because many people, again, because of stigma, don't want to make the call or walk through the door. Or I know a lot of folks are referred, and many of the referrals fall through the cracks because people just don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's really hard for families to reach out and ask for help, and hopefully with some education around, the different programs that NCSS offers, someone can find, an appropriate fit for them. And we really do try to meet the needs the best we can of the family and the needs that they identify. And I think that's what allows us to be so successful in our programming, is that it is very family and client-centered.
Well, this has been very enlightening, and I want to thank my guests, Holly Branon and Joshua Tuck, for sharing their insights on NCSS home and community-based services and the impact that they have on children, youth, and families. And I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. You can learn more about NCSS and all of our programs and services by logging on to ncssinc.org. I'm Joe Helko, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You.